Today we'll be looking at Unit 3, Notes number 5, The Causes of World War I. So hopefully a lot of this notes will be reviewed. This would have been stuff you covered last year in world history. So a great and terrible war. World War I was started, ignited by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand from the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So it was ignited by assassination, national rivalries, and we see the war ripping through Europe. So the war was referred to as the Great War initially. We don't start calling it World War I until we have World War II. European powers had made alliances and began to take sides in the fighting. So prior to the war starting, different countries were kind of fearful of one another and made secret alliances, secret pacts to keep each other safe. So basically, Europe was taking sides even before the war started. So once the war begins, you have the Central Powers. Some of the big names part of this group of alliance was Germany, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire. On the other side, we had the Allied powers, which included Great Britain, France, Italy, Russia, Belgium. And so there are more countries involved. Those are just some of the heavy hitters. And so once the Archduke from Austria-Hungary was assassinated, they began to get upset with the country that was responsible, Serbia. But Serbia was allied with Russia, and so you have these two countries that are opposing each other. And so even though it was a conflict between the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, the Serbian country that was responsible for the assassination, more countries got called into the conflict because of their associations through the alliance. So while this is happening, Americans are wishing to stay neutral. They want to stay out of the war. We see it as a European conflict. Let them settle their own affairs. We don't feel it is something for us to get involved with at this point. So here's a newspaper headline from the assassination. So it was both the Archduke, who was heir to the throne, and also his wife, who were killed by the assassin. So here's a map of Europe at the time. So you have the Russian Empire. So this is prior to the Russian Revolution and the start of the Soviet Union. Have German Empire, Austrian, Hungarian Empire, Italy, France, Great Britain. And so what we'll see at the end of the war is the map of Europe drastically changing because of who wins, who loses, and countries being divided. And then also the Ottoman Empire, aka Turkey. So just different names for different countries because it's not today. So American neutrality. While the U.S. pushed to stay out of the war, so our initial opinion is to stay neutral, American opinions began to splinter, began to change a little bit. So most Americans opposed risking U.S. lives without U.S. interests at stake. So still most Americans feel we should not declare war, we should not get directly involved in the war. However, many Americans felt favoritism towards Great Britain, so we wanted to support Great Britain in different ways due to our common ancestry, language, government, economies. We have a friendship and a loyalty to them. So before long, Americans opposed going to war, but favored an Allied victory. So if you really think about neutrality, it means someone staying completely out of it. You're not helping one side or the other. You're not wishing one side wins over the other. And so our American neutrality in quotation marks, we're not being involved in the war, but we're starting to favor one side over the other. So trouble on the high seas. During World War I, U.S. companies profited greatly from the demand for goods from the Allies. So because now all of these countries, Great Britain, France, Germany, they're all at war, it makes it difficult for them to produce their own supplies. So the U.S., nothing's going on in our country. Our factories can go into high gear. We're making lots of supplies for the war. However, Eventually, U.S. trade to Germany begins to decline as more goods are being sent to Great Britain and France. So we are again not being completely neutral because we are helping one side over the other. We're not sending as much to Germany, but we're still continuing to help Great Britain and France even more so. Britain had initiated a naval blockade of Germany. The goal was the blockade would starve out 750,000 Germans and keep U.S. goods from reaching German markets. So trying to keep them from getting supplies that they needed. So to break the blockade, Germany announced unrestricted submarine warfare. This meant that German U-boats would sink any ships in British waters regardless of who they are. So they're beginning a policy of, you guys are blockading us with your ships, we're going to sink your ships. And so any potential ships in water, naval ships, cruise ships, become threatened. So here's a graph to show U.S. exports to Europe and the change. So it starts in 1912, and so the different colors mean different countries. Great Britain's in red. This just means the rest of Europe. It's all Europe, the rest of European countries together. France is in blue. Germany is in gold. And so right about when the war starts in 1914, we see our exports to Great Britain going up, to France going up, everywhere else in Europe going up, but there's a sharp decline in exports to Germany. So we're definitely favoring the Allied powers over the Central powers. So next, let's look at what's setting the stage for America in World War I. So again, our policy is neutrality, but we are favoring and assisting one side over the other, but we're not at the point of declaring war and sending troops. And so we're looking at right now what exactly changes that for the U.S. to get involved. So first, there is the sinking of the Lusitania. So the Lusitania is a British cruise liner. So this is, like the Titanic. It's a cruise ship that people go on to vacation to travel back and forth between England and the United States. So it's a civilian type ship. So on May 7th, 1915, a German U-boat torpedoes the Lusitania off the coast of Ireland. Close to 1,200 people are killed, and out of that, 128 of them are Americans. So people are upset. So now American lives are being lost as a result of the war. So Germany was responsible, and so they claimed that the ship was carrying war supplies. So even though it was a civilian ship, because it had war supplies on it, it made it fair game. So regardless, U.S. public opinion began to turn against Germany. People are now starting to say, it's targeting the U.S., it's an act of war against us. But still at this point, President Wilson is ignoring calls for military action. He's trying to keep us out of the war. He will win re-election in 1916 to be president again. So even with the sinking of the Lusitania, President Wilson does not feel this is enough for the U.S. to declare war. So ignoring U.S. threats, Germany expands submarine warfare in 1917 to all ships in sight. So it's not going to distinguish between American, German, French ships, private ships, civilian ships. It's just attacking everyone. So they are becoming more severe with their submarine warfare. So despite the sinking, Wilson and the American people are hesitant to go to war. The Lusitania tragedy is unforgivable for most Americans. Still, the U.S. is wary of sending American boys to die in Europe. Wilson vows to wait until Germany commits an overt act of war. And then the Zimmerman Note. So despite U.S. calls for peace, Germany pushed ahead for open war. So January 16, 1917, Britain intercepts a telegram intended for the German ambassador to Mexico. So this message was sent from Germany to the Mexican ambassador, and the message proposes an alliance between Mexico and Germany against the U.S. So Germany is promising that if they ally with them, if they invade the U.S., so if Mexico invades the U.S., to kind of distract the U.S., keep them occupied during the war, and then once Germany wins, they will give to Mexico territory that was lost in the Mexican-American War. So they would get back Texas, Arizona, New Mexico to Mexico. And so before this telegram was received, the British got it. And so the telegraph was published in U.S. media, turning public opinion in favor of war. So here's newspaper headline: Germany seeks an alliance against U.S. And so this is seen more as an overt act of war, where now Germany is plotting against us, encouraging another country to invade us. So this is very upsetting, very upsetting. So German provocation left President Wilson with no choice but to ask for war. So at the same time, the Russians are going through their revolution, so they step out of the war in 1917, making it easier for Wilson to enter World War I. The conflict was now a matter of moral diplomacy, democracy versus evil. America would enter the war to defend democracy worldwide, and on April 2nd, 1917, America officially enters the war. So with public support behind him, Wilson convenes Congress on April 2nd, 1917. Sorry, that is a mistake. Oh, so here's an opportunity, an extra credit opportunity. Come and talk to me. Tell me what is the incorrect date I give for when the U.S. enters the war. So you want to tell me April 2nd, 1914. First 10 students will get extra credit points. So pledging to make the world safe for democracy, he asked Congress to declare war. So again, moral diplomacy, he's doing something because he wants to make things safe. And so it's more about doing something good, but at the same time, we're also trying to get what we want. Wilson asserts that the war is a moral responsibility, and victory would mean an ultimate peace. He reassures the world that America has no desires for spoils of war. So we're not looking for new territory. We're not looking for acquisitions. We're just going in to helping to solve the problem and end the war. Wilson and the American people felt that the U.S. had joined World War I to create a new order of peace and freedom through U.S. leadership. And so here is a picture of Wilson addressing Congress, making his congressional declaration of war, asking Congress to declare war. So this is the end of the notes. You want to make sure you do your summary, you look at your key terms, fill any key terms that we may have covered during the notes today.